Everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. I've got an incredible songwriter with us today and just a super talented artist with Robbie Fulks. Give you the cliff notes on Robbie in a second. I just want to thank our mutual friend, the one and only monster guitar player, Red Volkart. If you guys have not, Red's been on this show, check out his interview, but if you've never heard Red play, I highly encourage you to just sit and spend a couple of hours going through YouTube. The guy's a monster. So thanks, Red, for connecting us. Robbie Fulks. Robbie's a singer, recording artist, instrumentalist, composer, and songwriter. He is by far, this is my words, this is not in his like bio or something, one of the smartest and most clever lyricists I've had the pleasure of listening to. He's a phenomenal just a phenomenal storyteller, and he's able to develop and articulate very specific particular character traits in his song characters, and that's not an easy thing to do when it's not like he's writing a book where it's unlimited real estate. When you have a limit on the real estate, meaning the amount of words you can use, it's really the smaller the limit. You got 4 or 5 minutes. That's not a ton of time. This craft becomes extremely difficult, and Robbie's just a master at it. He's really just awesome at bringing his characters to life, and he evokes emotions in you as the listener about the characters in his songs. And primarily it's like the ups and downs of the common man, and the practicalities or impracticalities of the situations we all find ourselves in, or we don't want to find ourselves in. He's also a great guitar picker. He's got his voice, awesome. I mean, second to none. Most of Robbie's music falls in and I'm sorry, Robbie, I hate to categorize, but people are going to want to know. Country, alt country, and bluegrass. I hope I did a fair job of that. And one thing that comes across in the interviews I've watched and just from listening to Robbie's music is that he takes what he does very seriously, but he doesn't really take himself very seriously. And I think that's a flagship of a guy or a person who's pretty grounded and just happy about what they do. He's also very interested in learning and growing as a musician and a person. That comes through. Over the last 26 years, Robbie's released 13 albums. His 2016 record, Upland Stories, was nominated for a Grammy for Best Folk Album, and the song Alabama at Night, which was a beautiful track, was nominated for a Grammy for Best American Roots Song. This guy is a national treasure, and I hope more people get hip to Robbie because he's phenomenal at what he does. And not to sound like a fanboy again, but to combine meaningful lyrics at this level with such music, with such beautiful melodies in his voice, man, this is just a super talented guy. So thank you, man. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. So that's over. I don't think we can improve on any of that. No, thank you.
We're done. Man, you're done. Just like, every song I listen to is like, what, I mean, just to have that, I mean, you could tell you're super well-read. And where did you get the storytelling from? Because some people get that because they sit around, and I know your family was musicians and they hear stories, and other people it's just a gift. Where did that come from you?
Well, really, anything that I say after you said all that is just going to make it worse. It's just going to make because I'm going to be pretty self-flagellating if I speak about myself as usual. But you just made me want to go out and buy my own records and listen to them. I don't know where that comes from, but yeah, my parents were readers, and they instilled in me early on a love of that. There's just having books all around the house is great, and that's at least one thing that I've been able to pass on to my kids. Just being a book owner, and having them visible everywhere is a great way to come up, I think. But the storytelling thing, I made a strong chapter change in my thing around 2009, 2010, and part of it was consciously leveraging that aspect of my skill set or of my package as a performing artist more, which was just the lyrics and the storytelling, because for a lot of years, I've always loved. Just to pick one name out of the blue, when Ira Lubin writes a song or when Buck Owens writes a song, they're like amazing, simple nursery rhymes, and they sound unwritten. They sound uncalculated in a really appealing way. and obviously, just simple language. I mean, these weren't like Harvard-educated men, right? And
Sure.
they wrote some of the greatest songs of the 20th century. So it impressed me early on, especially early on in my love of country music, that a lot of the people that were doing it best were doing it from a not top of the brain place. There's a use of language that those guys have that's natural, but that it's whatever the opposite of academic is. They
More
were doing
guttural.
that. I guess more from the gut, yeah. You might say. So I aspired to that kind of writing a lot in the first 15 years or so of my 10 or 15 years of my thing, but. And some of those songs I'm very happy with. But anyway, at some point I thought, well, there's a whole strength here that I'm kind of overlooking, and that comes from, as you say, literacy and the lessons in how to tell a story that you might derive from anybody, from Eudora Welty to. I was going to say Flannery O'Connor. That's a very tight range, but Anton Chekhov and other master storytellers, like to try to incorporate some of those moods and ideas, and as you say, character ways of sketching characters in songs, which had previously struck me as an erudite and possibly pointless project. It started to seem more. Something to try. I mean, when it goes awry, it really goes wrong, that kind of writing. I mean, bad poetry, there's nothing worse. But, if you're skilled at words, why not try, amplifying that in your songwriting? Yeah,
well, you do it as good as Bob Dylan, as good as anybody that I've listened to.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
That's the first thing, that person that came to mind. I mean, when I was listening to, because I was reading the lyrics of a lot of the songs that I listened to, and I was like, God, this guy's like, nobody's doing this. Maybe Bob Dylan. There's not a lot of people that are doing it at this level. So anyway, thank you for putting all the great music out there. You were born in Pennsylvania, Robbie, but you grew up in small towns throughout the South, and then you finally settled in North Carolina when you were 12. And then, like an overwhelming majority of people who grow up in the South and fall in love with bluegrass music, you had a number of relatives in your family that were actually bluegrass musicians. You started playing your aunt's banjo when you were 6, and you moved to guitar at age 11. So I have 2 questions on all this. What was it about bluegrass that captivated you so much?
Well, the drive and the probably the storytelling and the high keening voices, that turns off some people, but I like it. My wife doesn't necessarily like it, but I do. So I mean, why the reasons why you like this or that, it's really hard to say, but those qualities just plus, it being one of the first sounds that you remember, musically when you're 4 or 5 years old. It's inescapable and it's ineluctable, I would say.
Yeah. Did you sort of know from an early age that you were going to play music because you had all these family members playing? Did you just think, oh, that's the family business, kind of, or?
Yeah, I think so. I had brief thoughts of being something else. Thought about newspaper work for a little while, or writing books, or even being a movie director. I think passed through my mind when I was 12. But I started in playing instruments when I was 7, and obviously singing before that. And the family thing was kind of maybe not quite as strong as you've just implied, but my dad dabbled in bluegrass. He was more of a Kingston Trio, Gordon Lightfoot kind of a folk singing guy. That was more his orbit. But we also had a family band for a little while where my mom played auto harp and I played, I played the banjo, and we all sang together. And then we'd all sing on trips and work out harmony parts. So all of that, like family singing and a little bit of church singing and choir in school, was totally helpful in, showing me how parts could work together and how to sort of intellectually think about different parts and part singing, and then how to sort of hold your own as a voice. Listening and singing at the same time isn't really easy. It's still something that I work on, listening and singing at the same time. Kind of interesting. I haven't read a lot about that challenge, but that challenge is there.
Well, what's also pretty interesting is, I think, to be exposed to that kind of thinking as a really young person, like structuring harmonies, and there's so many skills that come out of that. Like, just the ability to work that closely with somebody is a skill set, and that kind of creativity at a young age, man, I just think that's awesome. That's it's a unique thing, and it's good that you had that, man.
Yeah, it's really not intellectual, There's no decision-making involved in it, not a lot of thinking to do, but at least conscious thinking, right? But singing tenor alongside somebody else, well, I don't know about getting too far into the weeds with it. But when it's two voices, you have this creative room, and you have freedom to go up to, to the fifth or the third or the fourth, or dive down to unison, or actually go that way, switch.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting to me. The Delmore brothers did that stuff great. To me, they're still the sort of high watermark of that creativity, creative freedom in dyad singing. But yeah, with 3 parts or more, then you're a little more trapped in your funnel there.
Sure. Okay, so you graduate high school at 17. You move right up to New York City to go to Columbia University on the Upper West Side. What prompted that move, and what kind of culture shock did you have to deal with, or adjustments going from like a small town in North Carolina to, 112th Street and Riverside Drive or something close to that?
Yeah, well, I frickin' wanted to get off the farm, you know what I mean? Is it like that's about as far off the farm as you can get?
Yes.
And,
in every way.
Yeah. It wasn't the right move for me, really, because I was in over my head at Columbia. I really didn't belong there, but I got in, so I went, and my parents really wanted me to go once I got in, so off I went. I'd been to New York City once before when I was 14 on a brief weekend trip with my grandparents. So to me, it was mostly an idealization, and it lived up to it. It was dangerous and dirty and exciting and crowded and thrilling, and there was always something that you wanted to go off and see. I think the first weekend that I was there, mid-orientation week, I heard Tom Paley was playing in the Village, and I got excited. Like, here's a name that I've only known from records, and just like, again, an idealization. Somebody on a record, you've memorized their songs, you played along with the records, you form an image of this person almost as a friend. And I had that feeling about a little bit about Tom and 200 other people. But, went off on the subway train to go see the show, and the subway caught on fire, and I got off.
Excellent.
There was a fire, we were kicked off, and it was in Times Square, and the next thing I'm walking along through the peep shows with some guy that's trying to sell me some kind of drugs, and I can't get him off my tail. So that just pops into mind as the culture shock thing you were saying of, going from the farm to New York. Just so exciting. But I was there 3 years and didn't really make anything of a mark musically. I played a little bit on the the Gertie's Folk City and Speakeasy scene, and then in college, but not much of a mark. It wasn't my place.
So you finally left.
Yeah, 3 years, 3.5 years maybe, in and out.
Right. Was there anything, like, I know you did you played down in the Village from time to time. Did you get anything out of that experience, like as far as like entertainment wise, or the entertainment aspect of being an artist?
I think probably. I mean, you get something out of all that performance experience, right? But I didn't do it so frequently that I could really build momentum or gain the kind of benefits that you get from doing something consistently. I would play at Folk City once every month or two, maybe, something like that. one thing I found out, because one of the first guys I called up when I got there was Dave Van Ronk, another guy that I knew from records.
Yeah.
And
So
mythology.
you knew him?
No, it was in the phone book. I got his Manhattan phone book and went to the V's.
That's so funny. And you just said Dave Van Ronk, call McDougal's
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
You could talk to him on the phone, and I've had other friends that later that took lessons from him. Yeah, you just call. He lives in a place, and you go. But that particular phone call didn't lead anywhere. But you could go down to Gertie's, and he would run. I guess it is Speakeasy that I'm thinking of now, that he ran songwriter nights down there. I can't remember for sure. It was one of those two. But I went down and I played a Doc Watson song, and I played one of my songs. And I always remember that the bluegrass thing, like at doing flat picking at Folk City, and this is in 1980. It had a pretty palpable effect. Like the audience wasn't used to hearing that. And
hell no.
Yeah. You get up and sing, I'm so sensitive, and then the next song is, it comes kind of out of the blue maybe. And then being like a Southerner, like McLeod, Dennis Weaver in New York, is always kind of you make an impression that way. So
Yes.
it definitely made an impression that I was doing this, but it was negative in the sense that it gave me the impression that I was better than I was, So if
Okay.
you know what I mean? You can be a bluegrass player and play for rock people or play in folk clubs and say, wow, that guy's got something going on. But, sit next to Sam Bush and do it, and it's a different story. So
Sure.
that was something that gave me maybe a little bit more ego than I should have had at the time. Like, I'm a pretty good frickin' player here,
Yeah. Well, you're
But
young, too.
Dave was complimentary, and I appreciated the support from him. That was meaningful.
Yeah, he was like the guy back then. So what happened? Where did you go after that? You went over. You went to Chicago next, or
Yeah, I sure
what
did.
was that? What made you do that? Like, why would you pick Chicago for? Because I read that you had a publishing deal at the same time going with music somewhere in Music Row in Nashville.
No, that was 10 years later. When I first went to Chicago in
Okay.
1983, it was I got a girl pregnant. She wasn't just a girl; she was my girlfriend. And we were like, "What should we do?" She's like, "I'm not aborting. We're going to have the baby." And I said, "Well." We decided to move in with her parents, and they lived in Chicago. So all of that kind of like personal drama stuff was what brought me there. And that's the kid that's now 39. Is that right? Yeah, 39. So that's what brought me there. And I just spent probably the next 10 years doing different stuff, working at the Old Town School of Folk Music, teaching music. I joined a bluegrass band called Special Consensus, and we traveled around the country for. I was with them maybe 2.5 years. They've been going since 1975 and are still going with a lot of changing personnel. But I was the guitar player, singer in that for a while, and also had some straight jobs and played the folk clubs, Holstein's, and other places in Chicago.
All right, and then you then you got the publishing deal in Nashville.
Right.
Right. How was that?
That was another culture shock. I had a friend that Jim Dewan that I played with a lot in Chicago, and he got a songwriting deal in Nashville. And this was Garth Brooks days, so there was kind of a gold rush thing going on down there, and they'd been taking in songwriters a lot from L.A. for like 10 years at this point. So the outside influence in country music had already been established. It wasn't just hillbillies talking about moonshine. It was like Garth Brooks had musically complex songs, and so off I went. But having said that about the L.A. influence, that was not my thing. My thing was at this point pretty traditional country, and I was a big fan of the older school writers, meaning like Roger Miller, Bill Anderson, all the way back to Hank Williams and probably a little bit before. So I was a square peg in that way. And I worked at a place called Songwriters, Inc. They were the publishing arm of the management company of Joe Diffie and Tim McGraw and Ty Herndon and a couple other people. So it was an exciting opportunity to sort of try to write toward a market. And then you had the you had the tools there, the social capital or whatever, and the economic system, so that what you wrote could be directed right to the place, and Joe Diffie might
Sure.
cut your song. And then, of course, they pitched hundreds of other artists and producers as well. So that was a failure for me in that I didn't get any songs recorded by country artists. So it was a disappointment in that way. But it was beneficial to me in that it demystified songwriting. So before that, I probably wrote a dozen songs a year, and the whole process of doing it was mystifying, as I say. It was like I didn't know what I was doing, which can be good, I didn't know a 1 chord from a 5 chord. I could read tablature but couldn't read music, didn't know the number system. So I'd put together a song out of 4 or 5 chords that sounded to me like it was, you'd aim for Bob Dylan or Hank Williams or whatever it was and measure yourself by that yardstick, but not really knowing what I was doing. And once I started doing it on the scale that you have to do it at in Nashville as a songwriter, then it's not 12 a year, it's 5 or 6 a month. And that's what I started turning out. And you're expected to co-write, and you're just expected to come up with a bunch of eggs, so to speak, for them to throw at the wall and see what lands. So that was great. I loved having a sort of a deadline and an expectation of quantity, and so you might only come up with 10 good songs a year if you wrote 50. I mean, you might come up with 5, but I think ultimately it was clearly more good songs than I was coming up with before that, when I wasn't really under the gun.
Sure. When did you decide, hey, I'm going to just do my own thing? And what was that? Was that tough for you to make that leap, or not really?
Yeah, I always wanted to do my own thing. I mean, starting when I was 17 and went to New York, I thought, I want to be like these guys whose records I have, Bob Dylan on down. I want to have my picture on the cover and my name and have written the songs and be admired by legions. So that in a way, that never really happened for me, but, on the scale that I'm referring to there. But in another way, I feel totally lucky that I finally figured out how to do something like that, and how to have a little audience and make records and write songs. And it was just that process of getting to that point where my first record came out under my own name. That was like 1996, the first record that somebody else put out. I put out my own stuff before that. But from when I was 17 to then, that's like 16 years. That's a pretty long time.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of my favorite tracks here. I went through your whole catalog, and I had a lot more tracks that we could talk about than I have time for. No, I mean, I know it's really old fashioned. I like to listen to the evolution of an artist if I have the time to, it's like some people I'm really thankful my son, my younger son, my middle kid, was telling me today, he goes, Dad, I'm not like these people my age. I don't just listen to the song. I want to hear the whole record. I was like, yes, thank you. And I think there's you learn. You're going on a journey with the artist. Then, so if I have someone coming on the show and I want to hear where your journey started, and where's it gone. But I like that I really like that you push yourself and you execute new ideas because you want to do them. Specifically, I want to talk about 2 unconventional things that you did. You did a single in 2005 called Fountains of Wayne Hotline. I mean, I don't even know how you came to even thinking of that as a
I do.
Yeah, so I want you to tell the listeners about the concept for the song, and then how did this come into your head, man? It's pretty cool.
It's simpler than it seems, like in this case, which was that I was driving around in a van doing shows with a band. At this point, I was like part of a band, and the same 4 people did shows, 150 shows a year or whatever, riding around the country in a van. So a lot of time with these 3 guys and a lot of music listening, and we all loved the Fountains of Wayne, and one day we were traveling north on I-65 and listening to that double CD, what's it, Out of State Plates, which was just out at the time, and we started the game that's described on that song where
oh my God,
like I got a song but I need help from the masters, and then I'd call the guy in the back seat and he'd pretend to be somebody on this help hotline that dispensed advice. So that's really what it was. It was a van game turned into a song.
That's hilarious. It's totally awesome, man. I have no idea how that ever could pop into your, even if it got the game, but.
Well, and the people that are on the recording, Grant is a character and Gerald is a character. And so Gerald was the drummer in the band. He would have been in the back seat, and Grant was the guitar player with a low voice and the kind of cynical attitude. And or they're good at those characters anyway. And he was, there were such funny, smart guys that were in that group that I traveled with, and they definitely made it a way stronger thing than just the conception of it. The characters in the song are really good. I play kind of I play like a nervous, bumbling guy, which is a little bit of my energy, actually. And then Gerald, as anybody can hear on the song, is like very soothing with his personality and calm down, and we're going to walk you through this. And like he does have that effect when you talk to him, this guy. And then Grant is like, what the hell are we doing here? That character comes naturally to him. So using people's real personalities is like, that's always a good idea, right?
Yeah, for sure. But what a cool thing. And then you did an entire record called Robbie Fulks Plays the Music of Michael Jackson. I you know what? When I saw that, because it's not, I use Apple Music, and it's not on Apple Music.
Right. Well, I
don't
put it
know
out.
Why.
I put it out myself, so I'm probably just, I pressed 1,000 records, and 300 are still out in the garage, But that came about in an organic way too. I think all of these things have pretty simple explanations, even though they seem like queer or bizarre ideas. But somebody hired me at a what was it called, the Cultural Center in Chicago, to do a show on Michael Jackson's birthday, and as in doing that, I sort of rearranged some of his songs with guitar and mandolin, and kind of in my style. And I just thought, I really enjoyed doing that, and I hadn't thought about how much I liked Michael Jackson, first of all, ever since that I was, 6 or 7 and the Jackson 5 records were coming out.
Sure.
He was kind of heroic to me, somebody close to my age that was kicking the world in the butt and singing so unbelievably. And then the other thing about him is that, like Cher or like Bob Dylan, a few other people, like if you're our age, he's just always there, or at least until he died. But he would just never go away, and he was always evolving. And what's Michael Jackson up to now? And from 1970 till when he died, 2009 maybe. He was just always there. So there aren't many artists that are always there. No, there aren't.
That was just I really, like, not a lot of people do stuff like that. Like, Neil Young, David Bowie, but not a ton of people will say, hey, I want to do this, and then just have the balls to do it. So I thought that was really cool.
Thank you.
You have a song called Bethel Ridge. Is that the right way I pronounce it?
Yeah.
Bethel Ridge, off of Let's Kill Saturday Night. It's a really, really beautiful song, and your voice, I thought your voice, you did such a great job, was so sensitive to the melody. It was almost like you were improvising in a minor key throughout the track. It just sounded like beyond lyrics. And love left a child to hold, but my love has long-term cold. What is this song about?
Well, that's a good question. This is going back so far now, and I haven't really performed that song in probably 23 or 24 years. So I don't know. I don't remember, other than just images flitting through my mind, like lyrically, what that storyline, to me, it's almost like still pictures or something, or like a silent horror movie, let's say, than it is, something with any referential points in real life. I think two things. You were just talking about the song. I haven't thought about this. I'll go back and listen to it and see if I like it anymore. But one thing about that song, two things I remember that might be of interest. One is that it was written as a duet for me and Gillian Welch. And and we were recording in Nashville. This is like the late '90s, and her thing was going all guns blazing at the time, and my thing was just like trying to come up, and so it never worked out. Like we'd call, and my producer or I would call in the morning, and they wouldn't be awake. Mid-afternoon, they still wouldn't be awake. We're working on this record, thinking this is going to happen, and it eventually didn't happen. I asked a couple other people. I asked Julie Miller, and eventually I ended up with a friend singing on it, and ended up like driving from Nashville to Chicago, picking her up, driving back down to Nashville. Like in these days, apparently you just didn't think of like sending somebody a file, right, and having them sing
right.
on it. But
Isn't that funny, right?
It was a whole rigmarole going from the original idea of a duet with Gillian Welch, but it was written like with her in mind, right? So like that.
You talking about Gillian Welch, the actress?
No, the songwriter and singer.
Okay, sorry.
Who some of your listeners will definitely know who she is. She's a pretty strong presence in what would you say, songwriter, country / folk / old timey music, and she's been covered by Emmylou Harris and a lot of other people, a lot of bluegrass singers. Anyway, it was written to her thing, to her aesthetic. And the other thing was that, to me, was interesting was the producer was a guy called Rick Will, who was always full of challenging ideas, and was usually kind of high too. Like he was pretty. He was more like a rock celebrity producer than like a country sort of practical-minded producer like Billy Sherrill or one of these guys, you know. But so his idea on this was to play the guitar backwards. So I charted it backwards and played along in my head on the guitar with the track. But as you know, that song has some loose time in places. It has some two-beat bars of different beats. And it was really hard for me to do. So I remember making the chart, reading it, and trying not to pay attention to what was going on in my headphones, just play along. The sound on the record is that backwards guitar. Rick flipped it around after I played it. So that was fun.
Beautiful track, man.
Thank you.
You have an album that came out in 2001 called Couples in Trouble, and I thought that was such a good title, and I enjoyed loads of music on that record. Anything for Love, Real Money, Banks of the Marianne, a few others. To whatever extent you're comfortable, what was the genesis for that title, Couples in Trouble? Because it was just, you know, I've been in a long-term relationship. I think you have been in a long-term relationship, you know, and you sort of hear that, like, you know, not, oh, they're in trouble, you know. So I just thought it was very, very funny or very interesting that you had that. So what was the genesis for that title?
Well, thanks. I like the phrase.
Yeah.
The story is probably less interesting than that, but or it was more strategic than that, you might say, which was that. So I do these records that are kind of all over the place, like Let's Kill Saturday Night or that record. You know, and then I do these other records that are more, a little bit more generic, so to speak, like a musical style. Like I have a record called Georgia Hard that's pretty solidly 70s country. Another one called 13 Hillbilly Giants that's kind of like 50s country. And so there's this narrow boring down into a style of music and sort of trying to immerse myself in this pre-existing style. And then there's other kind of record where you're like, let's open the floodgates and let all musical influences in and mix them up and synthesize and, you know, mad scientist style and see what happens. And so with that kind of record, it's usually seemed to me that like records need some kind of boundaries, right? You don't want to just like let everything open up. You want to have definition to the experience. And for that reason, I thought in the case of Couples in Trouble, well, this will be the boundary, is this concept that every song can be musically whatever it happens to be, use any instruments, have, you know, weird edits, and just like really experimental musically. But each song will be about a couple that's having some sort of a conflict to resolve. But it's still pretty open because the couples aren't like romantic you know, always, or maybe even mostly, I can't remember, but there's a brother and a sister in one. There's a woman and Satan in another one. There's a man and the ghost of his ex-wife in another one. So there's all sorts of different pairings of people, not always, you know, erotic or whatever.
I think it's so cool that I mean, it's not easy to come up with all that stuff. It's pretty difficult. I mean, to the average so I mean, that's awesome. Is what I'm saying.
Oh, thank you.
You mentioned Georgia Hard. You have a song on there called Coldwater, Tennessee. Man, that was a beautiful track. What's the backstory to that one?
Well, I like to know where my songs are a lot of the time, you know, where the characters are, because where you are when you're having experiences, you know, the environment has a strong effect, right? If you're living in a small town or a big city, right there, the ambient noise is different, the noises that you hear all the time. Just for an example, or if you look out your window and see a mountain, or you look out your window and see a factory, I like to have those pictures in mind when I'm writing a story song. And often I'll have an atlas out, or these days, you know, just be online and look at regions, think about town names, which was how I came up with Coldwater, Tennessee. I just saw it on the map. And I thought that's a great town name, Coldwater, Tennessee. And then once you have the name, like sometimes I'll plug in Coldwater and I'll look around the town, you know, on Google Earth or something, and maybe look at a Wikipedia page if it's a bigger town than Coldwater and see what kind of vegetation is in the town and just get a sense of it. More often, I like to have lived there, or at least driven through there and gotten a sense of it in person. But if I'm writing about a place I haven't been, I do kind of look at, you know, what it looks like and what it might feel like to be there. So
that's really cool. So you do as much as you can to put yourself in the shoes of someone walking around the streets of Coldwater, and then come up with what might have affected them. And so you're feeding your imagination data in a sense, and then saying turn loose with all this particular data.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if the story is, especially if the story is geographically centered, I think it's probably necessary to do some of this stuff, right? I mean, the name of the song is Coldwater, Tennessee, or Bethel Ridge is another town, I think, in Kentucky that I was working from there. So, and I have another one about Statesville, North Carolina, which is like totally imaginary. It's a song about a prison. There's no prison there. So I think in that sense, that song leaves something to be desired. But if you can write about a place meaningfully, I mean, sense of place is so powerful. You know, I think it's maybe just as powerful as a love song, right? If you can evoke a place. Places are so powerful.
Well, too, I never really gave it that much thought until you said, environment has a strong effect, and it really, I mean, you know, look at a child born 2022 here in anywhere in America versus, you know, someplace in Syria, for example. I mean, the same person's going to have a totally different life. You know?
Yeah, I heard a political commentator say the other day that a child born in like the year 2000 has a totally different sense of politics than a guy born, you know, 20 years earlier, or in my case, 40 years earlier, which is like politics is a madhouse and an irrational like tumult of craziness in America. And that's normality or normalcy, whatever the word is, to that person, to that younger person. But to you and me, we might experience this as like what's gone wrong, you know?
Right. Yeah, man. That's a good, right. Like just, right. Man, that's a really good point. A lot of it is Alabama at Night. I'm sure you get asked about this one a lot because it was a very popular song from Upland Stories. That is such a perfect song. It's mostly you and an acoustic, and there's some steel guitar playing in there. And the steel fills were just great. Really, I loved it. The lyrics are pretty powerful. A child not far from birth with the end etched in her eyes. The morning star above her and a hem upon the breeze.
A hymn.
A hymn. Hymn,
Hymn, yeah.
Okay, okay. I wrote "hymn" for some reason. A hymn upon the breeze. That's how it came out in the on the lyrics and the thing. Uh, the poor's no sacred song. Poor is a disease. That's some heavy stuff throughout that track. What was the story plot or the backstory to this?
Well, the reason I wrote this song was I was working on an idea for a musical with a guy called Brian Yorkie, who wrote a play called Next to Normal and a couple other really great musicals, well-known musicals. And we decided to focus in on James Agee and Walker Evans's trip to Alabama in 1936 to write a piece for Fortune magazine. It eventually turned into a pretty prominent book called Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, like a severely ironic title. But Walker Evans's pictures, I think even more than Agee's prose, came out of that with a lot of artistic force. And so the image of a child, like a 4-year-old with death in her eyes, comes from those pictures, those black and white pictures that he took. And it's, I mean, you mentioned the last line in the song about poor is no sacred song, poor is a disease, and that's a rewarding part sometimes of writing a song like this, which is obviously not in the least playful. You know, it's a really somber song that hopes for and hopefully gets attention of people that hear it. And for me, a common experience in writing these kinds of things is that, I often, not always, but often write them sequentially, right? So like the first or second verse will precede the last, and you have a first or second verse in front of you, and you start thinking, okay, this is good. I think I'm going to finish this song, and let's see where it's going. And that idea of where is it going and how does it end becomes a little anxious, because you don't want to let the song down because you think it's going pretty well and could be a meaningful experience for somebody that ultimately hears it. But when you're in that midpoint and you don't know how it's going to end, you don't have that. You know, in the case of Alabama at Night, you have this sort of moral punchline that it ends on about poverty is a disease. This is all to say that it's challenging to get to that final place, to put that little punctuation at the end of it, but that's a lot of the fun of being inside that adventure as well. And that ultimately when you're singing it, you're sharing a simulacrum of this adventure with the audience. Where are we going and how does this end? And then it ends hopefully in a satisfying little click there at the end, and you're sharing the experience of being on that initial journey of the song with the audience who are in the moment and taking that journey maybe for the first time.
Is it the title of that book, Let Us Now Praise
Famous Men?
Okay.
It's a hard read, but if your listeners take a look at it, the pictures are just out of this world, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to have a look at that. When you are writing like that, how demanding are you of yourself, and how that's probably a difficult thing to strike a balance between. I want to be fair to the song. I want to do everything I can to communicate this story in this song, but you want to be fair to reasonable with yourself. And I would imagine that's a tough thing to do at times.
I guess I'm not sure. Can you sort of rephrase it? I'm not sure where to get a handhold there on that.
So,
demanding on myself.
As demanding on yourself as far as, okay, I've done the job, versus, man, I think I could still do better. How do you, that's a tough line to walk. And as good as you write, it's a blessing and a curse, because you've got this standard that's really high. And it's great when you hit it right off the bat, but as we all know, you got to work for these things quite often. You don't just come up with right off the top of your head. That's why songwriting is such an art. I don't know if I cleared it up or confused or made it more cloudy.
Well, no, there's a lot of ways, I guess, to come back at that. I would say that, I don't consider I mean, I guess the correct way is never to consider a song done, right? It's like it's always improvable. And so there are certain songs that I've done that I still perform that are old and that I've just never gotten this line right or that line right, and you get a little wince maybe, or you just, I'll sing it fast and hope this moment goes away quickly and I'll get on to the next line. But I just don't have it in me to replace it with something better. Can't think of a way. And then there are other songs that you do think of ways and that you surprise yourself listening to. If I hear a recording of something that I've or if I've been singing something a certain way and then encounter a 10 years old recording of it, and I'll find, oh, I changed this word, I changed that melody, I changed the tempo of it, like big changes to have made. But that's a great benefit of touring and playing the songs constantly, is that hopefully they'll have this sort of river on a rock effect of smoothing it out. And yeah, I don't know. Is that a good enough answer?
Yeah, it is. It is a good enough answer. I just think it's a tough thing to do, especially when you have a bar set pretty high, you know.
Well, yeah, and you never know, right? Like, I mean, some people know. I was talking to Amy Mann last year, great songwriter who lives near where I live, and she was saying something that I kind of disagree with about how she never gets. She doesn't allow the reaction of an audience to affect what she does, and I do, and I think that's proper too. I don't know if I could not take that into account, and it's not just well, it's partly like the intensity and level and length of applause, right? Like that kind of lands. And then if you do a song 100 times and that stuff keeps landing, then that affects my impression of the song. I start to think, okay, I thought that was good. Now I'm pretty sure that it has something going on.
Sure, you got some validation.
Get some validation. But I think more than an audience, if my wife likes it or musicians that I play with seem to like it. I don't know. They don't often give really strong opinions one way or the other. But if you get the sense that those people that have more of an investment in you personally think it's a good piece of work, then that probably counts for more than 100 strangers. But I think they both count for something. So when I finished writing inside a hotel room and said, okay, that's done, get out and start performing it, I'm never 100% sure. I'm never 100% behind the song, and usually just always open to backlash and to the, this is not good at all. Stop that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Steve Albini from Chicago has produced a number of your records. He is not a guy who works a lot in your genre. I was just curious how you guys met and what initially prompted you to work with him.
Well, we met through a mutual friend when I had a straight job at a law firm in Chicago. There was a sax player there that had played on a couple of big black records. That was Steve's early band. And so he introduced us, and I did some recording at his place. He was then recording out of his house on Francisco Street in Chicago. And I'd say two things about him were that we got along pretty well. I enjoyed being in his company and sort of talking with him, and he taught me a lot because he knew tons more about recording than I knew then, or probably than I still know. And the other thing, honestly, was that he had a reputation at this time, which was 1986, and I did not, and so I valued it just for that reason. Like I'm getting to hitch my wagon onto this thing here a little bit, and his name opened a few doors for me in those days that wouldn't have been opened otherwise.
Sure. Okay. Makes sense. Well, it seems like it's been a great working relationship. All the stuff he's worked on that you've done is great.
Well, thanks. It's good, man. When you go to make a record, you try to think about who is well suited to record it, and so there are, not just with Steve, but with everybody. I mean, guys bring strengths and they bring biases and a sense of aesthetics to the table, right, when they're going to record your songs. So in the case of Steve, it's let's get everything in a room and set up multiple mics and take a snapshot of a performance. And it's other stuff too, but that's a way that I've learned to value recording, as a snapshot of an event rather than an assemblage of sound inputs, say, or of different people's passes over a basic track. I don't like that way of working, and I've developed that bias largely from having worked with Steve. So it's kind of a simple conception, but it demands that everybody just do a great job. On the 1, 2, 3 go, do your best, listen hard, make the group thing sound like a total recording, and then his mixes tend to be, I would say, unfussy. He doesn't do automated mixes, for instance. So everything that you hear on his records are his hands moving faders around and moving them very gently with spare electronic effects. And for a lot of the records that I want to do, that approach works great.
Yeah, could see that. You mentioned God in a lot of your songs, and I was curious. I mean, a lot of your songs in a lot of different ways. To whatever extent you're comfortable, I was curious, where do you see God or a higher power in your life? And what's your own relationship with God or any kind of higher power? And just for the record, no judgment. I just like to be open to ideas about this from other people. So whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure. Well, I was a Christian with doubts, like all Christians have, until I was 15 or 16 when it started to fade. And later in life, when I started reading really committed atheists, Dawkins and Hitchens and these guys, it gave me more ballast, I would say, for the creeping doubts, as far as standing by the doubts, I would say, and being unashamed of the intuition that there was not maybe an organizing principle out there. And I think where I come down on it is that I find the idea of a personal God that's interested in our lives to be unsustainable. I don't see that manifested in my life. Terrible things happen, and they seem to happen more or less at random. And I also don't see it manifested in the design of the universe with all of its dark matter and patches of nothingness, interrupted by little small localities of orderly collections of matter. It's so. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but I think I am. I'm open to a conception of God that doesn't involve that stuff, that doesn't involve answered prayers and a very well designed universe. But that's almost like not believing in God, to that point. If you're not going to believe in heaven, you're not going to believe in a reward for having a virtuous life. If you're not going to believe in this kind of cosmic order, then what's left? What's left is very vague, right?
Yeah, but I think I think people, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I don't know that. I didn't come from a structured anything. So I'm really open to, that's why I'm curious about this, because I didn't come from any sort of, there was never a mention of the word God when I was a kid, when I grew up. So I'm open to just hearing what other people think about this. And I don't think that's I understand what you're saying as far as, you're open to a relationship or an existence, but it's not at that level. I mean, I don't hear.
Well, what's the evidence is what I'm trying to say. There's this problem of evil in Christian theology. Why do terrible things happen? And this is a big problem for religious believers. Why does an omnipotent and all-caring God let the Holocaust to the Jews happen? Yeah. And so that's not a problem for a non-believer, right? It's random. And as far as, being open to different beliefs, then then that's a great idea. But in the history of religion, and a believer of Islam or a believer of the divinity of Christ, those ideas are either true or they're not true. As C.S. Lewis said, either the Christ story is true and wonderful, or it's one of the most monstrous lies ever told. There's something to that, and the avidity with which the believers in these doctrines have pursued the ideas to the end of the earth and tried to convert other societies and committed violence in the name of those ideas is a problem for me.
No, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't think any religion is espousing that. I don't know, but it doesn't feel right to me. Like make sure you convince others, even if you have to kill them. Is like I struggle with that kind of thing. I don't see what benevolent deity would issue that command. Just seems a little weird.
I'd say sitting here in 2022, we can say that stuff to each other openly and on this broadcast forum, but if we were sitting in 1222 or 222, we wouldn't have that freedom. And the reason that we do have that freedom to say that is because of this slow secularizing force that we've been beneficiaries of these last 300 years. Well, shorter than that.
2000, yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate you sharing that. It's interesting. Yeah, because I just saw it a lot in your songs, and it was in different ways. So I was curious about that.
Gospel songs are great, though. God is a powerful word. Love is a powerful word. So it sounds disingenuous, but I want to use these powerful ideas in a story, and I love gospel music. I mean, music sung from a point of view of total belief is hugely powerful, right?
Yeah, very. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Who wants to sing about dark matter in the universe, or when he's like, who wants to sing about science? I mean, it can be done, but singing about God or love is better. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it connects with a little more people. Robbie, tell me the top 3 musical experiences you've had and what made them so much fun.
Well, I would put 2 of them in 1973, and one was going down to Richmond to a basketball arena to see, in order, Doc and Merle Watson, John Hartford, and the Earl Scruggs Review. And I was 10 and recorded it all on a little cassette and listened to it until the tape wore out. And that show, especially John Hartford's part in it, really set a lot of my future direction in a definite direction, I say in retrospect. In the same year, we went up to Warrenton/Culpeper to see a festival up there, which was the first time I saw Sam Bush and his band play, the first time I saw Tony Trischka and his band play. And I don't even remember all the other stuff I saw, but those 2, in particular, Sam's thing, made a permanent impression on me. It was like a pretty religious experience. And then the third one, probably NRBQ. I saw them open for somebody or other at the Ritz, maybe, in New York in the early 80s. I think maybe they opened for the Stray Cats or Dave Edmunds or somebody like that. And seeing those guys do the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald as their last song for 8 minutes until they were booed off the stage, and then a small sector of the audience gave them a begrudging encore, and they came back on and did it again. I thought, this is unbeatable.
That's no longer around, the Ritz. I don't know. I'm sure you know that already, but yeah, Ritz has been gone a long time.
Yeah. You went there as well, I guess?
Yeah, I saw. I think I saw. Not John Popper Blues. What's his band? Now I'm spacing out.
A Blues Explosion? No, that's something else, isn't it? Blues Traveler.
Blues Traveler. Sorry, thank you very much. Yeah, I saw Blues Traveler there, and I think I actually saw, and it was a horrible show. I saw a B.B. King open for Greg Allman, and it was when Greg was not doing well, and so and it was during the week. I remember I had to work. I was a CPA. How funny is that? So it was really late, and Greg Allman, it was like an hour and a half. It's just like waiting for him to come on. And I remember I had to leave. It was just like too late. Yeah, but BB was great. Yeah, that was a good.
What year was that, Craig?
Oh, well, I left the city in '89, so I think it was probably around, had to be within a few years before that. but somewhere between 81 and 89. I know, very vague.
We could have bumped into each other back then, I guess.
Yeah, we could have. Yeah.
You were born there in the city?
Yeah, I was born in the Bronx.
Nice.
Yeah, and I was there until 89. I'm afraid to ask the next question, so let me know. What were some of the low points or dark periods you've had to deal with in life, Robbie, and how'd you get through them?
Oh,
I've never actually been afraid. Well, I've been afraid, I think, to ask this maybe once or twice. This is
of different people?
Yeah. I don't know why. I'm just afraid to ask this question to you.
Who gave you the most memorable answer, just off the top of your head?
It's been a couple of people that have had like heavy like sexual abuse stuff, and were comfortable, and they've done a lot of work to the point where they could talk about that stuff. I mean, one story, Al Berry, bass player and session player in California. I mean, this story, I'll never forget it. He was sexually abused as a kid, and then like early 11, 12 years old, let's say, grew up in the projects in Philly, and then 5 years later, he'd been working out, he had a girlfriend, his life was really on the rise. He was playing music, and he's sitting on a bus, and one of his abusers gets on the bus.
This is like a movie.
Right. And I'll never forget what he said, because it was so powerful. And I said, how did you hold yourself back from like killing doing something to the guy? And he said a couple of things. First of all, he said that, and I think this is incredible for someone, a teenager, to think like this. He said, look, when the guy, apparently his abuser's mother was a lesbian, and when this is back in probably around the same period of time, because Al's like a little younger than us, just slightly, so within a few years. So it was probably like in the late 70s, early 80s, and he's or mid 80s even. And he said that when you're back in that day, when you're gay in the black culture, he said it was not super popular. It wasn't like, oh, cool, she's gay. And he said he had this empathy for the kid because he knew that he must have had a really shitty childhood himself. But the second thing he said, he goes, I also thought, Craig, he goes, how could I ever get that? This is his words. How can I ever get that stain off of me?
If he had committed violence.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, because I wasn't like, I certainly couldn't have thought like that at 16, and probably not at 36, to be honest with you. But I was just so, the guy's just done a lot of work on that, So that was one of the heaviest answers. But I've had others who, similar stuff.
Yeah, you must have had to have gone through something like that. I mean, it's hard to imagine just being in that guy's shoes. See people after the massacre at the Charleston church, like relatives of the people that Dylan Roof gunned down, saying that they forgive him. These, old Christian ladies, that we forgive him. I cannot fathom that, and that's adjacent to the story that you're telling too. It doesn't. He's not saying he forgives them, but he's worried about the future effects on his own character, I guess. But the effect is already there. How do you remove the stain of the abuse is another question, right? Right. But anyway, to go from the, I don't know if that's sublime, but to go from that to the relatively absurd, I would say the low point of me was the separation from the woman that I mentioned was the mother of my first child. When we separated, I was kind of like adrift for a while, and angry and almost murderous, I would say sometimes. And that lasted a long time, but it slowly got off of that murderous edge over a year or two into a livable place. And so this is like the, what is that, 87. Well, it was really the time I was in Greg's band and the Special Consensus band. So other good things were going on at the same time. But I always remember that that being set adrift, sort of being homeless. It's the wintertime. Where am I going to live? I can't see my child anymore. Maybe what's going on there? That was just the worst feeling.
Yeah, I've been through a divorce with kids, so I know that.
Is that right?
Yeah. My two oldest are from my first marriage. I got married when I was really young. My current wife, we've been together 30 years. She's adopted them legally, though, so she's raised them. And she's their legal mom at this point. But the weird thing about it, getting married or, forming that union, you don't have any answers for that, but it's it seems natural. Splitting up when you have a kid, I remember when I did it, I felt so unnatural. The whole, there's no manual here, it was just, I remember that it was a weird time.
Yeah, it's violent. And, I've never felt as violently, I don't think since then, as I felt at that time. But, if there's an upside to it, I mean, all of these terrible experiences maybe help prepare you for other problems in life, or maybe prepare you for dying. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure you got a few good songs out of that, no?
I don't know. I mean, I don't find that writing songs in a time of emotional turmoil is really that helpful overall, I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're not murderous. What are some things you did? I'll combine these questions. What are some things you did or some personality traits that you feel have contributed to some of your success?
Well, what success are you talking about exactly, Craig? I don't, let's see. What are some things?
I had a funny feeling you were going to come and say that, actually.
What are some things I did? When I've gotten better, it's almost always from other people's input, right? Like it's largely from the musicians that I travel around with, that I've gotten better. I don't know so much how if I've gotten better writing songs. Maybe that's a more private thing, but better in general, like as a performer, as someone who thinks about music, and tries to make music happen in performance and on recording. It's really other people's ideas that help me get there. So I guess if I were egoistically closed off to those streams of information, then I wouldn't have gotten anywhere, right? It's just being attentive to that stuff is important, and I'm glad that I've been able to be somewhat attentive and have had good collaborators along the way.
Thank you. Yeah, but just to go back to answer your question, 13 albums in 26 years, I could tell you right now, I've had guests on my show that would wish that, to me, that's successful. Of your own music, you didn't ask for permission to Robbie Fulks plays the music of Michael Jackson, I'm assuming, right? You just did it, right? Well,
a lot of these projects that you're referring to, as far as where'd you get the cojones to do that, or this requires a little bravery to do that. It's not so much bravery as having a tiny audience. I think it's like it's very liberating not to be in the position of Megadeth or somebody that really has to deliver and to keep 200 people on the payroll around you and to have a big bus that goes. I mean, I have such a small economic platform from which I work and the downside of that is obvious, right? But the upside is really an upside, and it's a creative upside. So if like this next record I'm putting out is a bluegrass record, and if you might notice that big time artists that do a bluegrass record, tend to do it at the point where their commercial value is declining. Like, oh, now I can do this bluegrass record, you know?
Right.
So for me, riding my little horse along, you know, under the radar, to mix metaphors, all these years, you know, oh, I'll do a Michael Jackson record now, do this then, you know, it doesn't have that, I got to do this because either I have to do this because I have to maintain this level, or now that I've gotten to this level, it frees me to do that. I can just always do what I want to do. So that's I love that, you know.
Yeah. Gear. What's your go-to guitar right now? And
well, there's two. I have a Collins DH2 and I have a Martin Sinker, which I'm sure you know, but your listeners might not. The Martin Company found a log, mahogany log, near Belize that was sunk way down low, and they turned it into, I think, 80-some guitars that George Gruen bought. So I bought one of those. It's called a quad, so I guess it's 4 zeros in a row. It's that odd kind of body shape, a little unusual. But I love both those guitars. They sound very different. You know, the rosewood and the mahogany sound very different, but I find myself picking up one and sticking with it for most of a several-month period, and then switching off to the other.
Right. Do you have a favorite song that you wrote?
Well, I might say Fairly Well Carolina Gals. When you have a favorite song, it's often one that came over time and with challenges and has some of your personal thing in it, rather than something that came, you know, without challenges. And in other words, an experiment that paid off, which I think is Fairly Well Carolina Gals. It's a long song. It meanders. You're not sure where the hell it's going half the time when you're listening to it. And maybe some audiences wish that it would get to the end of it sooner than it does. But having written it, I thought, well, nobody else has written this. And it's a lot of stuff that happened to me, and it's a lot of stuff that I can get really behind the emotion of it 100% when I'm singing it.
Thanks. Cool. I'm going to go back and listen to that now. Funniest thing that's happened to you on stage or in studio, or a worst gig ever story?
Well, I was doing a gig supporting a Garth Brooks impersonator. This is probably in 1994, maybe, and it was at a Hilton conference room in Minneapolis in the middle of the winter, and I was just hired with some other, hirelings, pickup guys to make a pickup band to go do this. This impersonator flew in from Florida, and it was an insurance convention. And, there's a lot of, really dull, stupid gigs like this, but in this case, we had so poorly learned this material in advance. There were 30 Garth Brooks songs that we were supposed to have learned, and not only that, unbeknownst to us, the impersonator expected us to be dressed in a certain way with a certain kind of sunglasses, like Ray-Bans or something, and outfits. We came like this, We just didn't. It wasn't even that we didn't care. We just didn't. We weren't good enough musicians, some of us, to have this gig in hand. I mean, those are hard songs, and we didn't have all the information that the agency didn't pass along, that there was a dress requirement. So this guy was so upset, and he lost it during the show. And so you picture this aluminum platform that we're playing, the thunder rolls, and he's got this Madonna mic on and this Garth hat, and he looks kind of like Garth, and he's trying to work the crowd, and the insurance guys are old and kind of drunk, and there's maybe 80 of them kind of half talking to each other and half looking up here.
And old and kind of drunk.
Yeah, And this Garth guy, he just can't believe what's going on stage, that we're letting him down in this way. And midway through the show, he took off his hat. I'll never forget. He went over to the metal railing alongside of the stage and pounded on it. And he said 3 times, "God damn it! God damn it! God damn it!" He lost his shit in the middle of the show, and darkness fell over this room as we watched this guy collapse emotionally. And I ran into him on the elevator the next morning. We're loading out of the hotel, and the door opens, and he's standing there in front of me, and he took a step toward me, like this, and then saw it was me, and then took a step back and panicked, and then he decided to be brave, and then he went forward in the elevator and stood alongside me. So we go down 7 floors together, and he said to me, I'm sorry about the way I behaved last night. And I said, that's okay, don't worry. And he goes, it's just that I expect my bands to behave a little bit more professionally than that. So that was the last words he said to me, so he's kind of exculpated himself and left, and that was kind of the end of that story. It was a good money gig.
Wow. That's a new one. Holy shit! So he lost his. I haven't heard that too often.
The meltdown.
Wow. Is he still around?
Don't know. Garth or that guy?
No, that guy. We should look him up.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, except he was from Florida. He was like a furniture salesman.
God. Tell me your top 3 Desert Island discs, Robbie. In no particular order, and just for this moment.
Okay. Band, Brown Record, Annette Peacock, I'm the One, and I don't know if I can name like a box set. That's kind of cheating, but the Bakersfield box set that Scott Bomar put out on Bear Family about 2 years ago.
Cool. I had this question. I'm going to ask it, but I didn't get the sense you were too tied to New York. Any New York City foods you miss?
Yeah, the falafel that you get on the street from the vendors. That was unforgettable. My friend Tony Kay, now deceased, said, you have not lived until you've tasted a New York City street vendor falafel, and he was absolutely right. I've not been able to make him at home to equal that first taste.
That's so funny. You know, when my daughter was little, she was probably, 4 or 5. We were up in the city, and we were walking down on Central Park West, around where the Museum of Natural History is, and we stopped and got her a hot dog. It was like crack cocaine. She finished. I've never seen this little tiny thing eat it's like inhaled it, and then like half a block later, she's like, "I need another one. Can you please help me?" Yeah. And so I guess it's.
I guess bad food just doesn't survive on the mean streets of New York, right?
Apparently not, man. It was funny though, but that's good that you said that. What makes you happy?
Conversation, books, music, movies, plays. My family. That's probably about the end of it.
That's a lot. So you're like a super creative guy. I noticed. I appreciate that about you. And you like taking in information and learning and just growing and processing stuff. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I'm working on a book about music. I've been working on it for this year and then last year, sort of in spurts. But I was just going to say about reading that the thing I don't like about it is that it leaves me no time to read about stuff other than music. I don't like to. I spend so much time thinking about music and then doing it. I don't like to spend a ton of reading time, like reading musician biographies or definitely reading music theory or something like that. Like my brother brought me a subscription to the Yale Journal of Music Theory or something for a year, and man, that was like a hard slog, like looking at that thing. I would imagine. But anyway, I'm sort of in that world with ethnomusicology and a little theory and a lot of history, and just trying to wrap my head around the musical movements and ideas that preceded the 20th century, going back as far as I can, and can't wait till I can get back to reading like a biography of Albert Einstein or a couple other things that are on my desk that have just been sitting there for a year.
When is the book? Do you have like a date that you think it's going to be coming out?
I don't. Actually, all of this year and last year that I mentioned is all trying to get something ready for my agency's pitch to publishers. As an interesting part of the process, you actually have to write part of the book and then outline and also provide sort of a marketing strategy idea. So it's a ton of work just to get to that first step of getting a bite, hopefully getting a bite from a publisher. So I'll have more information in a year or so probably.
Awesome. That's great. Happiest moment or happiest time in your life?
Well, in the mid-'90s, that's a pretty loose time frame, but I was newly married, having my first kid with my current and future wife, and also working totally in music like that. I never had a straight job again after like 1993, I guess it was, and by 1996 had my first album out with my own name on it, and another company put it out, not me. So everything was packed into that time. 94, 5, 6 was a huge chapter change for me, and it was all the stuff that I dreamed of happening. Having a happy family, having a career in music, it was all coming true. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't get over it. Still can't.
Good. Are you good with that as far as like not a lot of times when good things are happening, I'll speak for myself, it's been hard for me I'm waiting for the apple to drop, this is not going to last too long, and I've tried to work real hard to remediate that. Are you okay with like, hey, it's good today and I don't have to worry about when the future?
No, I'm working on that too. I think Buddhism and Stoicism alleviate some of that, the realization that there's just this moment and that thoughts and worries and anxieties about the future are really fruitless and they ruin the current moment, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen anyway, regardless of what your thoughts are. So I'm taking what I've just said in as intellectual information, but I haven't been totally successful in applying it to my thoughts yet.
It's a work in process.
It is.
I had someone here recently, they were in my office, and so I have like I don't look at them as inspirational quotes, just things here like for me to read to remind myself, like, don't wait for things to get easier, simpler, or better. Life will always be complicated. Learn how to be happy right now. Just stuff for me to keep reminding myself, And she said, I'm really inspired by all the things up in your office. And I said, don't be. I said, I'm glad it made you feel good, but it's a daily grind. I said, it's not. I wish I could just look at it and stay inspired, but it's more like good working reminders for me anyway, My
father-in-law had tattooed on his arm, he had tattooed, what is it? It is what it is. Like, what the hell does that mean? That sounds like nonsense to me. It is what it is. I mean, it's meaningful to him.
Is he from New York?
No, he's from small town Wisconsin.
Oh, that's like a very New York expression.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is what it is, yeah.
I've asked people. I've never really understood. It's like 4 equals 4. I don't know. It doesn't sound that meaningful to me as an equation. It doesn't sound that meaningful, but it means a lot to him. I just thought of it when you're saying this. You have this stuff on display. It's important to him to look down on his arm and see that. And I actually have another friend that works in show business, right? He works in like movie and TV production, and he has a tattoo on one arm and one on the other, and I forget the content of that tattoos, but one's to remind him that there's commercial work, and the other's to remind him that there's work that's meaningful to him, and that they're different arms, different concepts. I don't know. Again, it sounds a little silly to me.
Yeah. I don't have any tattoos because I have so much shit going in my head I could never pick. I would be, oh my God, I should have said this.
Yes, I have mother and a tweeting bird and a naked lady gyrating over here.
Well, my kids, my oldest and my youngest have tattoos, and my middle one doesn't have any. And it's just always fun. These tattoos today are totally different, from when we were kids. In fact, everybody's got them. It's like not even cool to have one anymore, it seems like. I'm the only guy in the gym doesn't have a tattoo.
Oh, good. So it's going away, maybe. Yeah. It's on the decline.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, no. One day.
Doesn't think so. I know. Most important thing your dad taught you?
How to play guitar.
Most important thing your mom taught you?
Profanity is fun.
Oh, that's great. That's a tattoo.
I don't think I need that tattoo. I think my personality pretty well is the advertisement for that concept.
Profanity is fun. That's awesome, man. I love that. Most fun thing you've ever done?
I don't know. I'm a roller coaster fanatic. Fanatic's probably putting it hard, but for pure adrenaline fun, it's hard to top a roller coaster. That's a pretty trivial answer to your question.
What's your favorite roller coaster that you've been on?
Well, I have a fondness for a number of them at Cedar Point near Sandusky, Ohio. But I'll just say the Mean Streak. I like the wooden ones. They're a rough ride.
Yeah, they are.
But I love the one at Santa Cruz. It's right by the beach too. That was immortalized in Jonathan Richman's song about it. There's so many good wooden ones. The Beast in at Kings Island, Cincinnati. Wooden ones.
Oh, you're like a serious roller coaster aficionado here.
Well, that's like you really think you're a Beach Boys or Beatles aficionado till you get to Nashville and find out people that really know everything about the music there. But the roller coaster aficionados they travel just to go, ride. I like them.
Right on. And biggest change in your personality, Robbie, over the last 10 years, and was this change intentional or just a natural part of aging?
Well, you sent me that in advance probably, and I didn't give it much thought like I should have. Biggest change in personality, and was it intentional? It's funny. I just had a memory triggered by that question, but first day of 7th grade, I had this conscious thought. I'm not going to be like this guy I was before, like teacher's pet, always smiling, eager for attention. From now on, I'm going to be like Bob Dylan or some cool rock star. I'm going to wear this leather jacket and eat this apple, not talk to people unless they talk to me, like look around, smoke cigarettes. And that was such a conscious change. And I don't know if that was part of the question, change for the better?
No, it was what's been the biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and has the change been intentional or just a natural part of aging?
Well, I think that I think when I got away from that eagerness for approval, that was a big step toward getting away from eagerness for approval, either from my teachers or my parents, and maybe even partly from my peer group. And I didn't stick with that particular mask over the years. I've gotten to be a friendly, more sociable person since that teenage stretch. But I also think that stepping away from eagerness for approval some of that kind of stayed permanent. And
good.
I guess I'm glad it did. You don't want to be totally subject to the whims of other people.
Number one answer to that question, by the way, and I ask that question almost every interview, the number one answer is some version of that.
Really?
Some version of I stopped giving a shit what others think of me so much.
That's hard. That's why the 50s have been great. I mean, the 50s, these years have been really liberating, And part of it is you walk down the street and you don't even have to ask for approval. People give it to me. Like, I think, I'm like a white guy. I'm tall. I'm like dressed not too sloppily. My hair's combed. And I've got my wife by my side, sometimes my kids, if they're visiting. And I think I get the idea people look at that and they say, okay, well, that guy has gotten over the shoals and the rapids and is at he's, in other words, you're perceived as somewhat successful just by being a certain age,
being alive,
and not being a total fucking wreck,
Yeah.
And having some structure that you've maintained around yourself. So it's like unearned mostly, but I enjoy having that approval from others. At the same time, it's a little bit, just saying it, you can see how silly it is, right? That you get this unearned respect from people for these attributes that you didn't really work toward.
I don't know if it's unearned because, people are losing their shit now. People, coping skills are not at like a super high level. So I don't know if it's unearned.
Well, it's a nice idea, and I've had this conversation with our mutual friend Red, and he's pushed back against it with, well, you've earned a lot. You've kept a band together and a family. That's very that's great. You know, who could do that? There's a lot of these losers out there that so. It's nice to hear this friendly pushback, but I don't feel that I really earned it that much.
Yeah, well, congratulations for letting go of.
Did you like my Red impersonation?
Approval. That's it. That was pretty close, actually. It was, it wasn't, you need a little more Canadian, but it was pretty good, actually.
Well, yeah, he is Canadian. I've just developed this impression. I've used a lot on David Greer, who's also guested on your thing, and David's the number one fan of my Red impression. He it's like a musical request, like do the Red impersonation, like describe this moment as
play
Red.
This song.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Oh my God. He's a great guy. I love that guy. Hey, let's talk about. First of all, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate everything. I really appreciate your music, and I'm really glad I took a deep dive into it. And you have another devoted fan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for putting all this great stuff out. You've got a couple of gigs at the end of the year at Fitzgerald's in Berwyn, Illinois. One on the 30th and one on the 31st with our mutual friend. Talk about those gigs, and I want to get people to listen and show up.
Yeah, I'd love to sell a few more advance tickets to those. The 30th is duo night, and so for that I have Laura Orshaw, who's a really gifted up-and-coming fiddler and singer. She plays with a group called the Poe Ramblin' Boys, and she lives out east, I guess, in Boston. I have Howard Levy, who used to play with Bela Fleck and the Flecktones back in the day, and as a master musician. I have Robbie Gerso, Nora O'Connor, and Gerald Dowd, who have performed. All three of those guys. If anybody knows my thing, they probably know those three people. And who else? Gosh, I don't want to forget anybody. Who else is there? Well, Jeff B. Davis is going to be the MC, and Jeff works with the live version of Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is Who's Live. And great improv comedian and also a good singer. We like to do Everly's songs and Brother Harmonies together. So that'll be a fun night. And then the 31st is Red Volkart, Dallas Wayne, Paul Carastia, myself, and Gerald Dowd doing Honky Tonk New Year's Eve songs of people like Merle Haggard and George Jones. And that'll be just a dance-worthy blast. So that's the only gigs that I'm doing between now and April, as I try to ride out what might be the next winter wave of disease, and before I get back on the road in April.
Where can people get tickets to that show at Fitzgerald's?
I would Google Fitzgerald's Fulks New Year's.
Okay, Fitzgerald's Fulks New Year's, Fulks. It's Robbie Fulks, Fulks. Talk about the record that you got coming out in the spring.
Well, this is an opportunity to drop a bunch of names. So the record that I have coming out is a bluegrass project. I did it in Nashville with some of my favorite, my friends and my heroes. And those include Shad Cobb, Stuart Duncan, Missy Raines, Dennis Crouch, Todd Phillips, Sam Bush, Sierra Hull, Ronnie McCurry, David Greer, Tim O'Brien, Jerry Douglas, Allison Brown, Randy Coors, John Cowan, Chris Eldridge. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful list there, man.
It's a great list, and it's a list that's probably about 2/3 of it. But each song is probably a slightly different cast than the last song among these 24 people. And the record's just out of mastering now, and it sounds great. It's coming out on Compass Records in April, as you say, and I'll be doing shows to sell that thing with different bluegrass groups of people over the next year.
What's the name? Can you share the name?
Bluegrass Vacation.
Bluegrass Vacation. Where should people stay tuned for? Like, is there social media or something, or your website that people would sign up to get updates on?
I've got them all. So I've got RobbieFulks.com, and then there's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Is that everything? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not on TikTok. Nothing on TikTok.
You're not on TikTok?
No.
Follow Robbie on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. and or like his page, however the hell you say it, but pay attention to Robbie. No, I mean you're an incredible artist. You know, I think people. I'm saying that sincerely. People, I want them to pay attention to you for their benefit. You know.
Well, this is a very well watched thing you do, so I appreciate the exposure.
Well, thank you, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
People die of
All right,
exposure, but I appreciate it.
Any final words of wisdom?
No.
All right. Listen, man, thank you very much for everything. Hang on a sec. I'm going to wrap this up, and I'd like to chat with you. Thanks for all your time. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your socials. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much to Robbie Fulks. Please, if you're in the Illinois area, go check him out at end of the new year on the 30th or the 31st at Fitzgerald in Berwyn, Illinois. And look forward to his new album in the spring. I wrote it, Bluegrass. What's the second word? I'm sorry.
Vacation, like the Chevy Chase
Bluegrass
movie.
Vacation, yes. Check out Bluegrass Vacation in April when it comes out. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. You like that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I was hoping you would. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have fun. Until next time, peace and love, everybody. I am out. Robbie, thanks for everything, brother.
My pleasure.